Hi, everyone. Well, we start with that breaking news tonight. Former President Donald Trump has filed a lawsuit against his longtime nemesis, CNN, for $475 million. Yes, his lawyers actually filed a defamation lawsuit today in Florida federal court. The complaint citing multiple ways the network defamed him, that it used its power to defeat him politically, they said, that it has stepped up its attacks against him as he considers running for office in 2024. Numerous times in the lawsuit, Trump and his lawyers stated how CNN frequently calls him a racist and claims the network compared him to Adolf Hitler hundreds of times. Numerous segments and current and former anchors were cited. Over the summer, the former president announced his intent to sue the network, saying he would also go after other media outlets who defamed him over his claims that the 2020 election was stolen. Trump had demanded CNN retract 34 articles and television segments. But I'll admit it, many, including me, did not think he would actually go through with it. After all, it's hard to believe that he'll actually comply with the required discovery process, where he'd have to answer questions, he'd have to turn over documents. The lawsuit itself often sounds like the former president's old Twitter handle. Page 1 starts with, quote, "The plaintiff, President Donald J. Trump, has been a longtime critic of the defendant cable news network, CNN, not because CNN does a bad job of reporting the news, but because CNN seeks to create the news. Quote, paren, fake news, as the plaintiff has characterized it in public statements. Beyond simply highlighting any negative information about the plaintiff and ignoring all positive information about him, CNN has sought to use its massive influence, purportedly as a trusted news source, to defame the plaintiff in the minds of its viewers and readers for the purpose of defeating him politically. The lawsuit says the network is afraid he will run in 2024. Quote, CNN's campaign of dissuasion in the form of libel and slander against the plaintiff has only escalated in recent months, as CNN fears the plaintiff will run for president in 2024. And on multiple occasions, cried foul that CNN called him a racist and even compared him to Hitler. Quote, as part of its concerted effort to tilt the political balance to the left, CNN has tried to taint the plaintiff with a series of ever more scandalous, false, and defamatory labels of racist, Russian lackey, insurrectionist, and ultimately Hitler. Quote, one of the most pervasive associations between the plaintiff and Hitler that CNN has employed is its use of the term the big lie in relation to the plaintiff's stated concerns about the integrity of the election process for the 2020 presidential election. And they then counted the mentions. Quote, a search across news database, for instance, in which Trump appears within 10 words of Hitler or Nazi in CNN broadcasts since November 2016, produces at least 645 results. It's the sort of research we do on this show. We comment on the number of times a network has said something. Now, this was one of the segments that Trump claims was false and defamatory, this one with CNN's Jake Tapper.
Over the weekend, while Martin Luther King III was in Arizona rallying to expand voting rights, Donald Trump was the same day in the same state doing the exact opposite, continuing to push his big lie.
Last year we had a rigged election and the proof is all over the place. They always talk about the big lie. They're the big lie.
There is a reason Trump was in Arizona, to push the legislature to disenfranchise the state's voters based on all of his deranged election lies.
The lawsuit cited several current and former anchors. It specifically cited a special from January 9th, 2022, titled The Fight to Save Democracy, hosted by Fareed Zakaria, and had this line.
Democracy everywhere is under attack. But remember, America has been here before. America has vanquished demagogues before. So how do we do it now?
Anchor Jim Acosta was also mentioned for saying this on July 17, 2021.
When we have entered the realm of coups and Hitler, we have to pause for a moment.
The suit also discusses an August 25, 2019 episode of Reliable Sources with former host Brian Stelter, who had on a psychiatrist who said this.
Trump is as destructive a person in this century as Hitler, Stalin, and Mao were in the last century.
The lawsuit also cited the new CNN president, claiming the network was trying to move more to the middle. Quote, on June 15, 2022, CNN's new chairman and chief executive, Chris Licht, reportedly held a conference call with top CNN producers in which he expressed displeasure with the use of big lie. Since then, CNN's on-air personalities, including John King, Jake Tapper, John Avlon, Breonna Keeler, and Don Lemon, among others, have continued to use the phrase in describing the plaintiff and the plaintiff's questions of election integrity, despite an apparent admonition from their chief executive officer. They say, reportedly, the term big lie has been used in reference to the plaintiff more than 7,700 times on CNN since January of 2021. So, could he possibly have a case? What if he argues he believes he won the election, and that there were characterizations like calling him a racist that he says were untrue? Floyd Abrams is the nation's most prominent First Amendment attorney. He has argued 13 First Amendment cases before the United States Supreme Court. He also represented Senator Mitch McConnell in the Citizens United case. He is also my father. Dad, good to see you.
Good to see you.
All right, so what do you make about the case, in particular his claims that they call him a racist and that they associate him with Hitler? Any potential shot on those claims?
I really don't think so. Look, we live in a country which protects, more than anything, the expression of opinion, the expression of what people think about other people, especially if they're running for office, especially plus if they're running for president or have been president. So we start with a very broad commitment to free speech and to speaking out even in extravagant, even over-the-top terms. That doesn't mean there can never be a libel suit, but it would really, really have to be beyond anything he's talking about.
Let me read you from a statement that was given by Donald Trump in addition to the lawsuit itself. It says, in the coming weeks and months, we will also be filing lawsuits against a large number of other fake news media companies for their lies, defamation, and wrongdoing, including as it pertains to the big lie that they use so often in reference to their disinformation attack on presidential election of 2020. You think he's going to do it?
Yes, I think he is going to do it. I think he wants to persuade them, push them, scare them a little bit to lay off, or at least not to come down as hard on him as they do, and they do.
It just seems to me the notion that Donald Trump is going to engage in any kind of discovery that would be required in a lawsuit, right? You'd have to turn over documents, you'd have to answer questions under oath, et cetera. I mean, as the plaintiff to a lawsuit, you can't invoke your right against self-incrimination. So how is this actually going to happen?
Oh, look, I don't think it is really actually going to happen.
Right.
What I think is more likely than anything is some sort of motion by CNN to dismiss the case with a pretty high likelihood of success. But if they fail, what's going to happen next? Well, at some point, we'll have an election. Is he going to be interested, win or lose? Let's say he's nominated. Win or lose, does he really want to pursue this after an election? I don't think so. This is, whatever else you think of him, this is inevitably, necessarily, in my view, a pre-election effort on his part, as to which he will lose all interest as soon as the election's over.
Is this potentially considered a frivolous enough lawsuit that the lawyers who filed it could get sanctioned or get in trouble, or is there enough there that at least they've survived that?
You know, we're pretty careful not to sanction lawyers for, weighing in for clients.
Right.
It's one thing in his document issue, if he says the FBI did something, and we understand why the lawyers won't say it.
Right.
Because they understand they're at risk. But to bring a libel suit, they're reasonably safe, no matter how toughly, as I think would happen, whatever court gets it cracks down on them.
Is it possible CNN would want this to go to trial? That CNN would say, you know what, we don't even want this to be dismissed. We would love to get, the news organizations are always saying we want as much information as possible. You couldn't figure out a way to get more information than this case moving forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely that they could get information, or if not, they could in any event take his deposition and make him answer certain things which he doesn't want to talk about. Like the big lie. I mean, there are a lot of questions one could ask Donald Trump under oath about what happened in Georgia. Yeah. What he said here, what he said there.
And wouldn't the key be what he knew, right? Because he would say, I believed it, right? I believed all of this stuff to be true. I still believe it to be true. And as a result, it is defaming me to say that I was lying with the intent to lie.
Well, we use lie to mean a lot of different things in America. Usually and literally, it's knowing something isn't true. On the other hand, if you say something that isn't true and there's no basis for it, and you say it again and again, and people say, but there's no basis for it, at some point, you get into trouble.
Yeah. Floyd Abrams, good to see you. I will not do what Chris Cuomo did with his mom and ask me how I look, et cetera, because, I had to fix your tie, or at least try to, before you came on the air. Even so, his mother might be better at this than you.
This is the best I can do.
Thank you for coming on.
Good to see you. Thank you.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your cable provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.